right? With digital or considerations that private practitioners in the mental health world need to consider when they're entering perhaps private practice or working in this world. I think there's some considerations that are tied to like social media and uh, electronic communication. So let me back up. What are we going to talk about today? What are we talking about today? Is this strictly a COVID type of presentation like Jessica Oslander did for us back in April? I don't know if you guys were able to join us for a 3-part series that she did. I know I learned a lot. I need to go back and reference those slides because what Jessica talked about was she talked about telehealth, right? She talked a lot about telehealth and how to get started in telehealth and what to do and some concerns and how to protect your practice, your licensure, and your clients. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I will be perhaps making some COVID-19, we may be talking about some things because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. But for the most point, this was written, by the way, I didn't write this particular curriculum in true transparency. This was in our library. I have presented it before, and it was made originally for a full day format, but I've shaved it way down to fit this hour. But it was even written pre-COVID. But I, it's exactly what the title says it is. We're going to talk about things that you must consider if you're a mental health practitioner in a digital age. It's intended to provide newer clinicians that are entering the field or clinicians who've been in the field that have worked together in a group practice, but who are going off on their own, okay? And things that they have to consider in their practice as they and their clients are connected to operating in a social media and digital world. Things that you got to consider. Now, because remember our ethics model as mental health practitioners, right? Remember, first, do no harm. And also remember that we've got to put their interests and needs before ours. I mean, we're here to work in this field to serve others, right? To help them leave a healthier, functional type of lifestyle through whatever mental health disorder they're working through or life event they're working through. And think about the priority that confidentiality plays in our industry. So with this being said, those are the things we're going to really be covering. How confidentiality, protecting ourselves, protecting our clients, more importantly, protecting our licensures and our practices as we operate in a social media and digital communications world today. So for newer clinicians or clinicians who are thinking about breaking off and doing their own thing, this is what this is intended for, and this will be hopefully new helpful information as you get started into this. And I think we shouldn't hold back, even if it's during the pandemic. You can still, as Jessica Oslander talked about in April, you can run a successful business through telehealth and through Zoom and some other things. We're not going to specifically focus on that. We're just going to talk about considerations, some things to think about, like the friending issue on Facebook, for instance. If you have a business account with Facebook, should you allow friending or not? How do you write a media policy, and why would you, right? And I can speak for, from experience, as far as practice goes, right when I was getting my practice going in Chicago and about to move here to Boston, then I started getting clients coming to me and I ethically couldn't take them on. And now I'm nowhere near, I've just moved and everything that's been happening. But I know doing a little research to make sure that I was informed before I did this presentation looking into this. These are things that you're going to want to consider being newer in building your own practice. So again, I've modified this all-day version, a 6-hour version, into 1 hour with what I felt was important. And this is what we're hoping that we will accomplish. And by the end of this, you'll understand why it's a double-edged sword working in this world of technology. Also, there's some ethical complexities regarding social media and electronic communication, texting and email that you need to think about. Okay, we're not going to tell you what to do. I might nudge one way or the other. They're like Googling your clients. Is that an ethical thing or not? Well, we have a take on that, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation. But We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about what you need to consider when you write a digital media policy and what a digital media policy is. Okay, with that being said, here are the objectives we're going to cover today. We're going to discover 2 digital types of today's technological world, written by a guy named Mark Prensky. He's an educator, written several books on this, but we're going to look at that first and see where you might lie in if you're a digital immigrant or native. And then we're going to talk about learning. We're going to learn the 3 reasons why you should consider marketing your business on social media, and the 6 areas of technology to consider when you write a digital media policy. I'm going to kind of shoot through these. This is what we've gone through. What was this, 40s, 50s to this, right? I just bought a new iPhone the other day. I didn't get the 11. I forget what this one's called. People are trying to call me as I speak, but the iPhone's a great thing. Which one of these do you use? Tablets, iPhones, laptops, all 3, like myself. I mean, I've got like 2 different sizes of tablets my wife's bought me. I don't use them. I've got a laptop, a couple laptops. I got a personal laptop. I've got a work laptop, and then my phone I just showed you. But in all reality, I only use one. Which do you use? Which do you use most? Do you have a separate work phone for your practice than your personal phone? Okay. I'm supposed to, if my supervisor's on the call today, I just have my home phone. But listen, these are things that we need to think about when we're practicing. So we're going to talk about that here in a second too. So these devices connect us. This is the new, it's not really the new normal. This has been going on for some time. This is our connection in our social world and our vocational world. Think about it. I wonder how Freud, Adler, and Jung would have responded and interacted, and if they would have done as much in their field 100, 120 years ago, if we had this technology at the time. I think some of that would have been dependent, or could be, of how they adapted to technology. I think this last category to the right is the most important, and it's our ability to adapt and harness today's technology. That can be the difference between you succeeding and failing in our business. I know I've got some tenured clinicians on the call today. How many do we have on the call today that have been in this business for some time, right? I can't even see. 2 participants raised their hand. 4 participants raised their hand. Listen, I kind of compared this, and I got to move along here, guys. Oh, everybody's raising their hand. It's good to hear from you guys. I used to sell real estate too. So I told you I was in the business world for some time, travel industry. I worked actually at Hertz Rent-A-Car, where I was a consultant. I did operations management. I did a whole lot of training, right? So, but I sold real estate on the side for some time. And we had those realtors in the office who they didn't have to market. They've been doing this since the 70s. They were making money hand over fist, and they never marketed. Why? Well, because they didn't have to. They had built up a clientele where they were just getting referrals. They worked hard, and they worked hard to get where they're at. But there's an element of that in this field too. I know, because I joined when the office that I was sharing with a colleague from Morneau Chappelle. The person who ran the office, she'd been in it forever. And she was trying to help me get it going, but she worked off just strictly referrals. Now, and perhaps you can do that, and maybe you can look into the realm of opening up a Facebook business account, or what have you. But for a newer clinician, I think this is the avenue to which you're going to let the world know you're open for business and that you're there to help them. That's the world that we're operating in. But as we enter this world, you've got to be ready for a few things. And some decisions you might want to make, or that you'll have to make, actually. Okay, so people and technology, there's 2 digital types. And as I said, this comes from Mark Prensky, an author, an educator. He's written 8 books on this. He's written over 100 articles on this. And I really found this source recently here, and I think it has some relevance to our clinical work too, working with our gamblers. He's a teacher. So he wrote this in teaching. I think there's an element of teaching, and you don't teach. I mean, if you're doing psychoeducation with a client, of course you do. But I think there's a common bond between teaching and therapy, right? And he said our digital immigrant instructors who speak an outdated language, that of pre-digital age, which that's me, by the way. I'm going to be 54 in a couple of weeks. They are struggling to teach a population that speaks an entirely new language. Now, what does he mean by all this? Okay, well, Mr. Prinsky came up with two classifications of folks, okay, that are tied to our digital world, right? The first one are digital natives, millennials, everybody that was born after 1980. Those who born, and when they were 6 or 7, the internet was, no, that would have even been younger. Anyways, they grew up with the internet, right? Anybody born 1980 or after, or actually born after 1980, as my notes say here, they use the internet for everything. Okay, they use a variety of social media: Facebook, Twitter, email, text, Instagram, Pinterest, all these things. But please note there's a typology, if you will, that happens under each one of these categories: digital natives and digital immigrants. And if you're a digital native born after 80, some of them have rejected to extent the technology as well. We can't generalize that all people born after 1980 that they're enthusiastic participants like on this page here. Some of them are avoiders, and they only use technology when it's necessary. They probably don't participate in social media, and they grew up with it, and they probably just never saw interest, never did it. Maybe they never ran in that circle, and they may not even have a smartphone, believe it or not. And this is a digital native born after 80. Then we move along to the right, reluctant participants, where they accept technology and they're not really eager to use it. They have an iPhone, but they use it because it's necessary, right? But then you have the enthusiastic participant that a lot of us old people like myself, middle-aged people, old people, whatever you want to say, think that all the digital natives are this, but they're not all enthusiastic participants, but a majority of them are. They are people who thrive on this. They buy the new iPhone every 6 months it comes out. I know that's an embellishment. I don't know how long between models, but it seems like it's 6 months. They have the new apps. They're hungry for more and more. They live in this world. Then there's digital immigrants. This is where I fall. Where do you fall? Text me, chat me, and tell me where you fall, okay? Now, these are folks who have had to adapt to technology as it's come, right? You know, some adopt with technology with open arms while others hesitate. And we cannot generalize here that us digital immigrants born prior to 80 are all avoiders. You know, I don't have a landline. And if you do, no, hey, no harm, no judgment here. But avoiders might have a landline, right? They avoid technology. They may not even have email. I've got some of my best friends are baby boomers, and I know some avoiders, right? Not a lot of them though. And then we have reluctant adopters. Now, I will tell you, self-disclose right here, this is where I lie. Reluctant adopters. I do it because I have to, although I can find some enjoyment in it. Even when I bought my new iPhone a couple of weeks ago, it was really heck, especially during COVID. Have you guys been to an Apple store during COVID? Well, they've done a great job, but you have to wait in a couple of lines here. And anyways, but we know as reluctant adopters that it's just part of our world, and we need to, and especially in our world, delivering services. In the company I work with, Morneau Chappelle, I've got to stay up somewhat with technology. So to do my job and effectively do my job, I have to keep up with this somewhat, okay? And then finally, we have enthusiastic adopters, okay? They are perhaps baby boomers, Gen X's, who participate in the most current technology. They immerse themselves in the digital landscape, you know, and they're what enthusiastic participants are to digital natives are to my group, digital immigrants. Okay, so And why is this important? And how can this relate? How does this relate to what we're talking about today? The connection here is, if you're looking to get into a practice, or you're operating a practice, you're looking to market digitally, or you're communicating digitally, you got to know these things about your clients, right? It helps you serve them better, and it helps you market to them better, okay? That's why. Are they an immigrant? Are they a native? And where do they lie within that, right? And where are you? It's like being, I just did a talk on culture competency in SureBet 2, right? And I think the first step in being more culturally competent is know where you lie within yourself, with your own culture and how you view other cultures. It's the same thing with this. Where do you lie first? Were you born before or after 80? Are you an immigrant or a native? And where do you fall on that continuum within each topology, right? Okay, so let's talk about digital communication. So I'm going to play this quick video for you, and I'm going to stop share here and then go back in because I can't see myself when I'm playing the video. I don't know. It's a, just bear with me. I want to play this video. It's a 6 or 7 minute long video, okay? And it talks about personal data being the oil of today. Now, we probably know that by now. I think this curriculum was written a few years ago, but personal data is the oil of today. This comes from a Danish journalist. It's a quick portion of a TED Talk. Her name's Pernille Tranberg. She wrote a book on Fake It, Your Guide to Digital Experience, and she talks about how to protect yourself. In fact, she has 3 different identities, but listen to this talk real quick. I think it's really interesting and relevant to what we're talking about today.
My name is Pernille Tranberg. This is my real name. This is my original identity. I use this when I'm online, when I'm on Twitter and on LinkedIn, and when I act professionally. And I love social media, I have to say that. But I also have another name. This name, Pia, I used that for 7 years on Facebook. And all my friends know me. And I use it on Pinterest as well. And that's because I'm not professional there. I tend to be a little more private on Facebook. And I also created a third identity, Nana Bak. And that's because so many pages and apps ask me for personal info constantly. And if you go to fakenamegenerator.com, you can completely make a really good identity where you get everything from height and weight and eye color and even credit card number. So why am I so kind of almost obsessed with this, you might think? It's because I did this book with a very good friend of mine called Stefan Hoyer, who lives in San Francisco. And the research for this book was a huge eye-opener for me. What is actually happening out there on the web and on your phones? We are surveyed 100% in everything we are doing. And to understand that, you have to understand everything about big data. You've probably heard about big data. It's a buzzword these days, right? And one of the best examples some of you might have heard was the supermarket Target in the US, who wanted to get to women before they got pregnant. Actually, even before they even knew themselves that they were pregnant. So they hired some data scientists, and they took all the data they had themselves on their customers and enriched that with data from social media and databases and everything they could buy. And then they created a pregnancy prediction machine. And then they could start marketing their products to these women who didn't even know yet that they were pregnant. And they were so successful that one day a father came down to Target really, really annoyed, saying, well, you're sending these coupons to my 18-year-old high school daughter as if you want her to be pregnant. And yes, she was pregnant. And he came back 2 days after and apologizing, saying, I didn't know she was pregnant. And that's what big data can do. It can predict things we can't even imagine what is happening in the future. It can predict suicides. It can predict whether you're getting pregnant or you are getting an alcoholic. And what can that data be used for? It's only up to your own imagination. Another example of big data is Instagram. A lot of you are probably using Instagram. Why did Facebook pay a value higher than the New York Times? It was an app making no money 2 years old, 13 people work there. It's because of data. There's so much data in Instagram. Of course, also because it's a mobile app. But there's so much data behind every picture. Every single picture you tell Facebook where you took it and who took it. And then this whole social graph, you're sharing everything with your friends. That's worth a lot of money. So we're talking about a gold rush, and World Economic Forum calls personal data the oil of today. That is what is making the whole digital world function. And as soon as something becomes so valuable, everybody wants it, right? And we are seeing a black market for it as well. And a guy called Joy Ito, who is the director of MIT Media Lab in Boston, he compares the situation today with the situation in the 50s and 60s, where people were polluting the environment. We didn't think about it at that time. And today we're paying a high price for that. He's saying what we're doing today is we're polluting with personal data. And many of us are going to pay a personal price later. I don't know if it's true, but it might be, and that's why I'm worried. It's all about your personal data. It's not one single Facebook update or one search. It's a puzzle. Everything you're doing is collected in big data banks, identity banks, and then it's stored and resold. For example, a data broker, Axiom in the US, they have like 500 million profiles on people. And every single person, they have 1,500 data points on those people. It's not something you join voluntarily. They just take it from the web and databases. And they know, what are you eating on the aeroplane? What are your vacation dreams? What are your health worries? Everything you're searching on and what you're sharing yourself on Facebook and all the other places. The title indicates that I'm going to talk about sex. I'm not talking about sex in real life. I'm talking about data sex, which is actually something Wired called this, what I'm going to tell you about now, in their last issue. We have kind of two kinds of people. We have a person at one extreme who is 100% private, who would never be on Facebook and never share anything. And at the other end, we have the data sexual, who will be completely sharing everything. They'll have a Nike Fuel band and tell everybody, well, I've been running so long now, and they're measuring their pulse and everything. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle, leaning towards a private person, and I'm going to get back to that as well. For me, it's all about trying to control.
Okay. So the reason why I'm playing that video, I think it's relevant to what we're speaking about today. If you're going to be operating, let me get out of this. So, if you're going to be operating, digitally, your stuff is going to be out there, if you will. And where do you lie on the continuum that she's talking about? Because if you're out there marketing or working in today's world, electronic media world and social media world, your stuff will be out there for clients to see. And we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. I can tell you the importance of data and the work that I do. I'm just not helping manage the training department here, but I do the reports. And I will tell you, I provide reports and put data in a way that, folks who need the data, the program administrators over the state's gambling programs need to see this data so that they can provide more help to more clients out there. That's why data is so important in our field. Personal data, right? Call in, believe me, we keep everybody safe that calls into our problem gambling helpline, but we need to put demographic numbers along with other numbers together so that we can see trends to help more people. So data is the oil today, even in our field. So, but I played that video so you can kind of be aware that, in today's world, information's everything and it's accessible. Okay, and we need to think about that too, on what we do online and some other things if we're in the mental health industry, I think, and especially if we have our own practices. Let's talk about communication real quickly. The two types: there's texting and email. Texting's one of the most quickest and easiest and most convenient forms socially. I've got friends I haven't talked to literally in years, and we just text still, best friends. You're thinking, boy, Robby's kind of weird, but it's true. I just text so much today. And again, I'm close to being a baby boomer, being born in 66. I'm a Gen X, but texting is just so convenient and fast. But today we're not talking about communicating socially. I'll make mention of it, but it's more about what we do in our practices and our work. Now, with saying that, it's not the most secure form of communication, but it's fast and it's convenient. Another thing you got to think about with texting with clients, do you guys text with clients in your practices? You might. The thing is, text me, speaking of text, chat me and let me know. It can start a precedent that you may have to lay down a boundary because if you've got a personal phone and you do your practice work from your personal phone and your, I don't know, or if you have a separate business phone, you could get texts at all ends of whenever, right? So those boundaries might be pushed if you allow that in your, because remember what we do for a living, we work with folks at a lot of times it's some really dire points in their life, folks suffering from distortions from perhaps addictions or mood disorders or any general mental health disorders. So, and we might be working with folks who don't know about healthy boundaries. So, you know what? We might want to include that in our media policy that I'll talk about here at the end. Emailing is more widely used amongst digital natives and immigrants, and it can be a more secure form of communication. The challenge here is the lack of speed, if you will. So, you need to communicate with clients that, hey, if you're in crisis, don't email me. Unless you plan to be checking that email, quite a bit. I would lay the boundary down and let them know this is a form of communication, but let them know I check email twice a day, morning or night, whatever that is. But just make sure that you have that understanding. And with passwords, safe passwords, if you're in a practice, and you're working on a shared computer, like at some places I've worked with in my career, you got to just make sure that there are different passwords and that everything's kept the way it should be so that we're keeping our clients safe. And then also, email can be challenging because we can guarantee, although we perhaps can control what we control on our end, we don't know what's happening on the client's end where they're emailing from. A couple of secure email systems. Again, I think this was written in 2014 or 15, but Hushmail, it offers basic services for free, but charges for additional, like HIPAA compliant, some other services. Smail, there's a whole slew of new. There's Zoho, I wrote this down, I did a little Zoho email, Proton email, Posteo, Colab Now, Countermail. There's all types of new secure emails that you can use. And I know some of you that I correspond with in this state and others, I've got to put in a password, open up an email account, and I get it. Because if we're corresponding with clients, we want to do that to protect them. Okay. And here's a notice of confidentiality. I'm not going to read through this because you probably have your own, right? That's just a basic, if you're going to be communicating in this industry with clients, this is great. Now, by the way, these slides will be available on the UNC Behavioral Health website, and the recording will too, but you can take a closer look at this notice of confidentiality, right, for email correspondence. So just remember, if you use email or text with your clients, that communications are part of the clinical record, right? Now, emails are probably easier to chronicle digitally, and you can just print them off to have hard copies if your practice still does that, or if you do still do that. Text messaging can be a little bit more challenging but there are apps out there that can export all the text. So you can print that up, put it in your folder, whatever. So there are apps out there, again, that makes it a little bit easier to group them together for clinical records. And just remember, we don't want to do any harm to our folks. We're here to help. That's why we went into this business. And we need to remember this, behind this this statement that we have, our motto: secure your data transmission and ensure that your clients protect themselves because they may not know, right? But anyways, uh, so remind yourself of that. We can't assume that your client, especially if they're digital immigrants like myself. Okay, so let's talk about online presence. Who on here has a blog? What does blog stand for? It's web log, the combination of the two. Blog, right? You might even read blogs online in our field, right? It provides information to peers and clients. Um, what I would say with blogs is they're an extension of you. So you need to be responsible for what you write and be accountable, especially if you're writing stuff like with evidence-based stuff. And if you write something that's outdated and someone, writes a comment, say, hey, I'll check into it, but just know it's an extension of what you write, right? It can help create discussions regarding topics of an area that you might be maybe your specialty, maybe you're a CADC and you work in addictions, maybe you're one of our network folks who work with gamblers quite a bit. But this is a good way to get to network. This is a good way to help and be helped by writing some informational blogs. Now, there's also personal blogs, family blogs, like this one, right? Now, as I just said, and as our video showed, if you put something out there on the internet, it can be accessed one way or the other. Now you can control this somewhat, like this family blog. Maybe Kyle or Michelle here on your screen is a professional counselor or social worker, and they have an office in Raleigh. But they like to have this fun family travel blog that they do. Now they can control this somewhat. You can create a link and send it to people you want to share. But if you put it out there, it can be accessed. Believe me, if someone Googles you. So you need to be mindful of that. It's kind of like the old adage, or what I learned, with in the office that I had there in Chicago. You got to think about if you want pictures of your family up, spouses up, or any personal information in your office where you do therapy. Not that you're not proud of who you are and what you come from and what your preferences are, but it's personal, and that can get in the way of a therapeutic relationship, right? It can. It may not, and maybe you have pictures up. That's your choice, right? But it's just another consideration to think about, just like blogs. Now with blogs, let me back up with my notes here. A couple of things you need to consider: who your target audience is, what type of blog it is. If it's a personal blog, you might want to, again, just share the link with people that you know. But remember, anyone can see a blog. And you need to think about comments. Do you want to look at comments or just block that altogether? Are you really sensitive? Because believe me, you'll get some comments. So you need to think about that. That's something else that you might want to consider if you put a blog out there, right? Professionally or otherwise. Okay, let's talk about social media. Social media. I'm sure we've got a lot of Facebookers out there. Maybe we don't. By the way, 10 years ago, there were just over 500 million users of Facebook 10 years ago. And I know that 500 million's 500 million, right? How many do you think there are now? What do you think that's grown to in 10 years? A billion? Maybe? A billion's a lot. Yes, I'm baiting you. It's 2.7 billion Facebook users. Holy smokes, right? I'm not on Facebook. My wife is. Most of my family are. Facebook's great. I'm not knocking it, okay? But this is a consideration. If you have a Facebook page, do you want, what if a client tries to friend you? We're going to talk about that. Here's our second learning objective on the right part of your screen. Why would you consider social media to market your business? Well, you can market your business to prospective clients. You can share inspiration material with them. You can share resources with clients and colleagues. Look, I think Facebook business is great. Now, if it's personal, it's a great way to stay in touch with friends and stay connected and share photos and In fact, there are all kinds of fun things you can do, right? You know, with Facebook. Uh, but again, we're here to talk about practice, mental health practice, perhaps in a social digital media world, right? And some things you need to think about, right? If you're going to use Facebook, business Facebook, or if you've got a Facebook page, personal up. Now, think about what the friend or not friend issue that I've been talking about, what that would do to a therapeutic relationship. Now, just in the case for you folks, I never assume as a teacher that everyone knows what friending is. Here are the ins and outs of friending. Friending someone on Facebook means you allow them in to see your personal information. You can set restrictions on it, though, on how much they see. Now, if you reject a person's friend request, they will be able to see that. They'll know you rejected them. But even if you accept, let's think about a client, if you accept or reject them, that could have bearing on the therapeutic relationship, right? Has this come up in your practice? I'm sorry, guys, I haven't been able to look at the chat, but you can chat me and how you handle it. Just know when you friend someone, there is always the possibility to run into an awkward situation of unfriending them. Sometimes it can be inevitable. There are actually apps that show you where you've been rejected or defriended or unfriended, whatever the right term is there. For many digital enthusiasts, okay, natives, where social media is the reality in their world, it can have a significant impact on them. And if they're your client, think about that for a minute. So things to think about. When I say it's things to think about, it's things to think about to put in your digital media policy, right? And lay it out there as your boundary that you don't friend any clients, or maybe you do, guys. Maybe let me know what your ideas on this are. For those of you that don't know about Facebook pages, business pages, it's the online version I wrote here in my notes of the old school yellow pages. You guys remember the yellow pages? Yes, I do. I even use them. That's where I'm at with my age. But it's online space on Facebook where you can advertise your practice without them seeing your personal stuff. People are able to like your page, which will not show them your personal information, but it's going to show you as the connection to the business. It can help clients keep up with, if you do a lot, I'm sure a lot of you do more than just face-to-face talk therapy. A lot of us probably do training like what I'm doing. A lot of you probably do consulting, but this is kind of your thing here where you can advertise what you do and write blogs and do some things to network and educate your clients and colleagues. So clients have the right to identify themselves as your client if they want, and they can see that on Facebook. But again, sometimes our clients don't understand what that could do. We've got to protect them, and they may not understand these boundaries, and we might need to clue them in on this. We could go on hours about this subject. I know this is my last slide about it. But what do? Do you accept a friend request and be careful about what you post? Maybe some of you do this. Or do you avoid the problem with all and block them? Now, this takes away their autonomy and maybe a great teachable moment with them with a friend request. Do you even want to spend the time and the energy involved on this therapeutic relationship relating to this? Or do you want to just write it in your policy as, look, this is what we don't do, is for these reasons, and sign here, I mean, you do what you feel is best. Either way, it's something that we have to consider when we get online and we start a business that perhaps we interact in the social media world. Let's talk about Twitter real quick. Do you guys tweet? Here is an example of someone who worked for the American Red Cross who had an important message about a hurricane, but if you see in the background, it looks like it came from that family travel blog I just sent up, right? Listen, I made a note here that Twitter's not for people with impulse control disorder issues, okay? I'm not going to even talk about the president. Because I don't want to bring politics into this, but that's there, right? I don't even have to say anything. Think back to 19 years ago. Remember Charlie Sheen on Twitter? Holy smokes, right? That's what we mean. But it is a platform that allows and encourages real-time stuff to go down for you to communicate about things that are happening. When clients see this information, though, here's kind of what you need to think about. They may relate what a comment you make on a current event to their case, to the session you had with them yesterday. They can draw that connection. Be mindful of that. But the good things about Twitter is it can get your name out there. It can connect you to other organizations, agencies, practices. It can help you with referrals. It can help educate clients or colleagues. Twitter's great. But if you have if you have an issue with impulse control, just know when you've got to be careful. We see it today in today's world. We'll probably see it today with anybody from the president to sports folks to rock stars, that what they tweet, sometimes I think you have to stop and think before you hit the button. Okay, let's talk about Facebook, right? This picture right here is what I'm not talking about. If you're going to the mental health field, I wouldn't have a picture if you're right out of grad school, for instance, taking shots with your friends. I think even someone coming right out of business school shouldn't have this up, right? I remember going to Boston College. We had someone come out. Were they from LinkedIn? I'm not sure, but it might have been someone at staff BC, but they said, listen, in the mental health field, you want to project a business attire, clean look, but you also want to look that's approachable. That's what they told us. Business-like, but approachable. A picture, not taking a shot. So most of us are probably on LinkedIn. In the case, if you don't know what LinkedIn is, it's used for professional networking. There's less concern about inappropriate information out there getting about you. Clients might be curious about your credentials, right? I found this job on LinkedIn, right? And speaking of Matt, here's a picture of Matt McCrary. He's a VP of marketing. He used to run our gambling department. But here's a good example, right? And again, you can find, hey, LinkedIn's a great way to network. You can find jobs on LinkedIn. You can do a whole lot of things. You can network and find whatever you need on network professionally. That's what it's there for. So you would think there's less opportunity to go wrong with the use of LinkedIn with clients, right? There's still some things we need to consider. A client can ask to be in your network on LinkedIn. What do you say? What do you do? People can ask you to serve as a reference or endorse their skills. A client might do that. This can be seen by others and could show the relationship that you've had for a client and put them out. And, right? And again, our clients may not know this. How do you explain your relationship if they, and a lot of, look, even in the addiction field, a lot of folks who find a great new way of life and go into recovery go into this field, right? And if they go into this field and they come back to you and you saw them and they want a reference to another treatment center or something to work, you got the multiple relationship thing going on. So it's all things to consider and think about with LinkedIn and having clients, right? I don't have time to go into this, guys. In fact, I'm looking at my time. I'm getting a little nervous. But so I think multiple relationships is the primary issue that can be violated when we're utilizing social media with your practice and when it's connected to your clients. So, here's some of the numbers behind some of these ethics and the codes behind it with the NASW, the APA, and the ACA. Here's an example of the ACA, social media. You could read on your own. If you're a social worker, go to NASW and you can find it all there. Okay, sorry to shoot through that. In our all day, we look at it, we read it, we share about it, but we don't have that time today. I've got 9 minutes. Okay, so what's the difference between a review and a testimonial? Just so you know, guys, it's an ethical no-no to solicit testimonials. Reviews on business can be started by anyone, but it can be a double-edged sword. And you don't want to use a public platform to go back and forth with a client, right? Where's that? Well, I think it's best done in private, right? In a session, perhaps, so we can work it out because their needs become before ours, right? Now on Yelp, it's hard to take down a negative or a positive solicitation. Now, if there is a page started on your practice, if a client goes to Yelp, starts a page on your practice, there's a button on the page that allows you to take ownership of the page. I don't know about the button. And again, I probably should have looked into this, but I know perhaps that you can, I believe you can do this. And Yelp's policy is the only way a review can be removed if it's violated. And I'll show you some of the violations of the policy. And with Yelp, it's possible to contact reviewers through the direct messages versus the via public comments to rectify any case concerns. And I recommend you don't do that out in public to air your therapeutic relationship laundry, if you will. But yeah, so these are some of Yelp's content guidelines that if they're violated, it can be taken down. Like if there's threats, if there's profanity, if privacy, according to these points here, privacy is broken some way, somehow, then it can be pulled down. But sometimes just because it's negative doesn't mean that they're going to take it down, because that's what the site's there for, to show the good, the bad, the ugly. If you look at Yelp, if you use Yelp for restaurants or whatever, yeah, So write these codes down. It's important. I don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this, but these codes prohibit the solicitation of testimonials. But what do we recommend? Hey, look, there's health grades. Have you guys heard of health grades? Now, look, it provides a confidential approach to client reviews. It's compliant with HIPAA per user agreement. It doesn't allow for written testimonials. There's not an open-ended feature, write your notes on what you think, but there's surveys. And that's a good way to indicate kind of where you're at, okay? And again, it's HIPAA compliant. It's called health grades. But remember, setting up your own page on like Yelp, look, that can be seen as soliciting testimonials, and that can be a no-no. Okay, I've got to get to Google real quick here. If clients Google you, Google captures everything. It can. In the in-person class, we have people Google themselves. If you haven't ever Googled yourself, try it. Data, because digital natives will, even digital immigrants will Google you. Think about it in today's world. It's just, if you have a practice, you might Google your practice and find that there's a Yelp page up on your practice. But Googling is just a part of life. Okay, so in today's world, so a Google alert here, you can, a recommendation that we have is to set up a Google alert on yourself so you can keep track of what information's out there. And please note that if you find some misinformation out there, there's an address. Again, you can get this deck through the UNC Behavioral Health website, but you can clean it up. You can go through the Contact Us link. And I believe I did this a month ago or so when I was preparing for this talk. But yeah, you can do these things. Yeah. So, put a Google alert on yourself. If you see misinformation about yourself or your practice, contact Google. Have you ever Googled a client? Okay. Let me go down to this second point here because I got to get through this. How many have Googled their client? 97.8 said they've Googled at least one client. 66.9 said that it was always or usually not acceptable to do this. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Well, this is what we think. Remembering our therapist motto or creed, do no harm, and we're out to serve others, right? We're putting their interests before ours. It's in the best interest of our clients, I think, that curiosity is not a good ethical reason to Google a client. And even if you ask permission and you get it for whatever reason, what help is that going to do with your, now, I know every case is different, but if it's just curiosity without asking permission, I'd say I wouldn't do it. It's not ethical. Curiosity is not an ethical reason to Google a client, right? Okay. I hope by now I've made a case about a digital media policy. I got to get to the last learning objective, right? And these are the 6 areas that we've talked about that you might want to include in your digital media policy. Texting, email, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Yelp, right? Or you know, testimonials. So what exactly, that's your third and final objective, those 6 areas. But what is, excuse me, a digital media policy? It's part of the informed consent that covers social media. So you need to get it out there so you can draw boundaries about everything that I've talked about today, and things that I've considered. Some things we've basically kind of laid down what we feel, but it can and draw a boundary. If you don't have a digital media policy, maybe you should think about drawing one up. It includes electronic email. It includes you know, social media. It's not only for the ethical responsibility, but also the boundaries I've talked about, and it's also about protecting our clients, right? Text and email, talk about what you can do and what you don't do, and if you're keeping them, that you keep them for clinical records, right? Email, how many times do you check your email? Tell them, I would recommend, hey, I wouldn't have it out there if you have a crisis, don't email me, call 911. I'm sure that's on your messages. It's on my message. If you call me, call 911 if it's a mental health emergency. Don't email me, right? Facebook, we want to talk about the friending or non-friending issue, you know, and what your policy is with that, and perhaps why. If you don't want to write in why, you can tell them as you go over this with them. Twitter policy, you're going to want to discuss the purpose of why, to educate and get things out and let them know. In no ways is this tied to anything that we talk about in your therapy. LinkedIn, I don't, you know, you could say, hey, I don't endorse, or I don't allow in my network with clients. This is why. You know, you could tell them and have them, and that draws a boundary. Or you can. That's up to you, right? Customer sites review, which we just went over, you know, and then discuss ways of allowing the client to provide you feedback through the therapeutic relationship if there's an issue, right? I think that's really important. Gosh, guys, I'm sorry I had to rush through that. I thought I wanted to include the video because I think it's important that you know about personal data and putting your stuff out there. And your stuff is probably already out there in our age, right? I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I've got a ton of chats, and I'm sorry I haven't gotten to them. And I'm just going to read a few. And guys, October 5th, get on the UNC Behavioral Health Springboard website. Thank you for joining us. Get registered for Don Feeney's. I think he pretty much said it was a part 2 of it. You know, he's going to pick up where he got cut off last time. So join us, please. UNC Behavioral Health website. Also, you can get these slides there. And also, you can get your a recording of this as well. Thank you very much. I'm getting some thank yous. But boy, I got a lot. I want to read through this because... Oh, thank you. You don't have to accept or reject on Facebook. Thank you, Valerie. It is unethical to friend a client on personal Facebook. Thank you. I don't friend any clients. I shared during the initial session that it's policy not to friend clients. Yeah, so you guys have digital policies out there. Just don't do it. Let them know text not encrypted. Boundaries are definitely necessary. Thank you. Text only for appointment issues. Very good. Oh, thank you, Allison. I wonder what that is there. She sent me something. Digital immigrant, reluctant adopter. Okay, everybody tell me who they are. Yeah, good. Guys, have a great week. And I look forward to hearing from you October 5th, okay? Have a good week and a good weekend. It's Thursday, thank heavens, right? It's almost Friday. See ya.